Good evening. I'm John Daniszewski. I'm the president of the Overseas Press Club Foundation. And welcome to the Academy Awards. Now, tonight we will have, thank you for coming, all of you. And tonight we will have the chance to celebrate some truly extraordinary young journalists who aspire to the noble calling of reporting the world outside the United States for the benefit of the world. I think we can all agree that international news and understanding is more important now than ever. We are at an extraordinary moment historically. Not since World War II have our international institutions and alliances been under such a threat. In the last few weeks at the United Nations, the United States voted with Russia, North Korea, and Iran against a Ukrainian resolution that stated the honest, obvious fact that Russia launched the 2022 all-out invasion of Ukraine. Then, this week, the Trump administration again sided with Russia by pausing military assistance to Ukraine after the president and vice president denigrated Ukrainian elected president Volodymyr Zelensky in the Oval Office. A country that is fighting for its freedom, that does not want to be part of the Russian Empire again. I will remind you that this is the same Russia that imprisons journalists, stifles free speech, and poisons its critics abroad. At home, the new administration is actively attacking press freedoms guaranteed by the First Amendment. The banning of the Associated Press from the White House pool is one emblem of its general attitude toward journalists. Like in Russia, it apparently prefers a tame and defanged media that exists to praise the leader. Chosen journalists who report kindly and sycophantically about the president will be rewarded, one would expect. Critical journalists will be frozen out. As the great Peter Baker wrote in the New York Times, a new chill has fallen on Washington. I congratulate the AP and its executives who are here tonight for the courageous response to these outreaches. Now, this is a lot more political than I would have liked to say in a ceremony that is meant as a celebration. But I think it is context for what these young people are in for as they begin their careers in journalism. We are entering an era when perhaps the certainties of the last century no longer hold. And we are entering a time when freedom of expression and freedom of the press will be questioned not only overseas, but in our own land. But I think our awardees tonight, the next generation of international correspondents, are more than equal to the challenge of ferreting out facts that the public needs to know for the betterment of the world. So before going forward, I just want to say a few thanks. First to Salesforce, which offered us this beautiful venue for our celebration. Then to our amazing executive directors, Kat Riley and Jane Riley. Who so ably keep our programs running, and especially for keeping close contact with our winners and assembling an excellent program for them today and tomorrow. Thank you to the family members and friends of our winners for coming here tonight and for helping to make them the amazing journalists that they will be. Thank you to the members of the Overseas Press Club Foundation board and the judges who helped select this year's winners. If you are here, board members and judges, would you raise your hands so you can be recognized? And thank you, of course, to our patrons, friends, and supporters who you will see listed above, especially Bloomberg and Mercedes-Benz. And I couldn't go on without mentioning my predecessor, President Emeritus of the Overseas Press Club Foundation, Bill Holstein. He did so much over the last 3 decades to make the foundation what it is today. I would like to ask you here to support the work of the Overseas Press Club Foundation, and that includes you award winners in the future. You will see a QR code on your programs. Please follow the link to donate. Any gift will be greatly appreciated. This money supports scholarship assistance for our winners. In addition to supporting the OPCF Fellows, this year, for the first time, we are offering reporting grants to former winners of up to $5,000 for special projects. And I would like to thank our board members who have made this possible. So we have dramatic weather tonight, and we have a dramatic environment in which to launch this event. Now it is my honor to introduce Laura Zelenko, the Senior Executive Editor and Global Standards Editor for Bloomberg News, and the founder of the Rob Urban Award for Eastern and Central European Reporting. Laura, would you come up to the microphone?
Thank you, John, and thank you for your important words and for being such a great fellow standards editor. So it is a great honor to be here today to recognize Sofia Sorczynskaya as the first recipient of the Rob Urban Fellowship for Reporting in Central and Eastern Europe. Our children, Sasha and Katja Urban, are both here to celebrate Sofia. We all felt strongly that Rob would have loved her story and wanted to support her ambitions to work as an international correspondent and to report on Russia. We all miss Rob so much and are so grateful to everyone, many of whom are here, who helped make this fellowship a reality. Our friends, our family, colleagues, and very importantly, Bloomberg's editor emeritus, and the person who hired both Rob and myself, Matt Winkler. Matt unfortunately couldn't be here today, but he sent me a gem of a story that Rob told him and that we'd like to share with you. Back in 2020, as Matt was doing research for a book on Bloomberg News, he interviewed Rob about how we moved from Charlotte, North Carolina, where we were working for the Charlotte Observer, to Prague as freelancers back in the early 1990s. And a year later got hired by Bloomberg and soon won the company's first Overseas Press Club Award. The winning series we wrote focused on the sale of fake securities known as prime bank guarantees by a young Czech bank, Banco Bohemia, to global investors. It's a wild story, and Rob brings it to life in his own colorful way. Reading the transcript brought me back to those early years after the Berlin Wall fell, when there was so much hope and optimism about the future for the whole region. Both Rob and I had ancestral ties to Eastern Europe, me most recently from Poland, and Rob from Hungary. And we felt very much at home living in Prague and ultimately Moscow. Rob traveled extensively to report everywhere from Siberian nickel mines to a Kazakh space launch, across the landmines in war-ravaged Serbia, and into iconic factories like Budvar and Škoda. There was so much to report on, and Rob embraced any challenge, never giving up until he got to the bottom of every story. We also started a family in the region, and all of us still have close ties. Sasha was born in Moscow. Both he and Katja speak Russian, and Katja has spent quite a lot of time in Poland herself, and will be returning this summer to take part in an art festival in Krakow. So it is no exaggeration to say it's incredibly important to all of us that Rob's legacy of ambitious and critical reporting from across Eastern Europe be honored and continued. Certainly, these times demand it. Matt hasn't finished his book, and Rob's words have never been shared publicly. So we thought it was appropriate to have them read today by our son, Sasha.
Hello, I'm Sasha. I'm Rob Urban's son. Thank you to the Overseas Press Club Foundation for having us and for presenting this inaugural award. It's really an honor to be here. I'm going to read the transcript of the interview that Matt conducted with my dad, telling the story of his real foray into financial reporting in Eastern Europe, and I will provide only a fraction of the color I'm sure he provided himself in the audio, but you know, I'll try. After studying Russian history at the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, I was an intern at the Charlotte Observer and then a cop reporter, which was a definite plus in journalism because the police beat requires a certain kind of person to talk to people on all sides of complicated issues. My girlfriend at the time, Laura Zelenko, she studied Polish politics at Princeton, and I moved to Prague. It was kind of impossible to miss the revolutions of 1989. The Charlotte Observer wasn't sending anyone to China or Eastern Europe, so we took our vacation money and moved to Prague, where we reported for Knight Ridder newspapers, which owned the Charlotte Observer. So we were on vacation from the Charlotte Observer and sort of simultaneously writing for the Charlotte Observer. We weren't familiar with Bloomberg at the time. I wasn't doing finance in Charlotte. Bloomberg News was growing incredibly rapidly. Bloomberg was in a hurry to cover everything financial, which was a big advantage to us as freelancers because of Bloomberg's deep understanding of finance and because our biggest customers for our freelance reporting were the central banks and bankers. That's when we got our first big scoop. I was talking on the phone to the chairman of the Czech Central Bank, and he said, "Yes, we are planning a Eurobond. We've talked to the rating agency, Standard & Poor's, and it will be investment grade," and he's going on in detail. I was new to this topic, so I called Mark Gilbert, who was Bloomberg's bond reporter in London, our expert on the market, and Mark said, "Wait a minute, this guy is chairman of the central bank, and he's telling you this on the record?" It was 1993. It was the first part of our education, which I often joke that I learned about markets and capitalism about 5 minutes ahead of all the people that we were covering in former communist countries. Because I had the Bloomberg terminal behind me, I would go into meetings, and there was an assumption that I was someone like Larry Summers, who was then chief economist of the World Bank, who I wasn't, of course, but there was an assumption I must be important because I had all of this data and financial information that everyone needed. I don't think anyone at Bloomberg knew we were offered jobs at Reuters. The Reuters Prague bureau chief at the time was a famous war correspondent who hated business, so he wanted someone to take the story off his hands. A very nice guy. But Bloomberg was the opposite, determined to bring transparency to all kinds of markets around the world, especially the bond market, and we were among the first at Bloomberg who broke that open. Laura and I sort of split Eastern Europe, north and south. We were able to hire good people, figure out what our customers wanted, and give it to them in an efficient way. Little did we know, our initial reporting would lead to a Eurobond fraud starting with a small Czech bank called Banka Bohemia, investigated by US, British, Czech, and Japanese authorities, and involving the US National Council of Churches. Banka Bohemia, which was never worth more than $20 million, wanted to raise more than $1 billion through the sale of so-called prime bank guarantees, which the Federal Reserve said were fraudulent. After the chairman and CEO of Banka Bohemia got arrested and convicted, he brought libel charges against me because I had written stories that the central bank ran in their own publication, and he said it was impossible for him to get another job in banking. Bloomberg gave us a lawyer, and we went to the police station, and the cop literally laughed with the bank chairman sitting there. The Banka Bohemia story showed me the power of Bloomberg because in the middle of this thing, I'm following the fraud around the world. I found a credit cooperative in Tokyo that had guys in Prague who sold to guys in London, who sold to guys in California, who sold the bad paper to Japanese bankers, and there I was, the North Carolina cop reporter, and all of a sudden, I'm talking to somebody in Tokyo about this investigation. Oh, and by the way, the bank went out of business. Thank you. And congratulations to Sophia.
Okay, and now we're going to see a video and meet all of this year's winner, including Sophie.
Hi, I'm Sofia Sorochinskaya, a journalism and international studies student at Northwestern University. I was born in Saratov, Russia, and grew up in Moscow. My first experience in journalism came at 12. After years of dancing, I wrote about my trip tour to Europe for a local magazine. My mom said, maybe you should be a journalist. I took it seriously. 6 years later, I already reported from political protests after the arrest of Alexei Navalny. But in Russia, my generation of journalists was doomed. At 19, I became a news producer at TV Ray, an independent Russian news station. A few months later, Russia started its full-scale invasion of Ukraine. We covered the war non-stop, working 16-hour shifts until the government shut us down, just like nearly every other independent news outlet in the country. With Russia in an information blackout, the only reliable news came from foreign outlets that were still covering the story from afar. That's when I realized the true power of international journalism. It's not just for people abroad. It's a lifeline for those seeking the truth in countries like mine. I came to Northwestern on a full-ride scholarship, determined to become a foreign correspondent. Then, despite the risks, I became an on-the-ground reporting intern for the Moscow Times, covering key political events and speaking with locals, often while hiding from the police. Knowing that I was the one bringing real stories from inside Russia to the world was magical, and I want to keep doing it. Thank you, Overseas Press Club Foundation, for helping me get closer to my dream. The RAB Urban Fellowship for reporting in Eastern and Central Europe will allow me to keep improving my skills and share the stories of those silenced by their governments.
My name is Charlie Clewis, and I'm currently a master's student at Oxford University, where I study modern Middle Eastern studies in Arabic. In 2022, while serving as an American military officer in Syria, I undertook an independent project to conduct hours of personal interviews with rebel fighters in the Syrian opposition. I was told firsthand accounts of the horrors of regime prisons, life under the Islamic State's caliphate, and the continued struggles of refugees stuck in a protracted stalemate. One rebel told me, "We have a cause, we have an idea, the revolution is an idea that will never die." And indeed, 2 years later, the revolution lives on. My long-form magazine article chronicling the Syrian Free Army was coincidentally published last year, on the very day that Bashar al-Assad fled to Russia. My time working, studying, and living across the Middle East and Africa, from the streets of Ghana to the desert of Syria, has instilled in me a desire to continue writing and photographing stories that illustrate the harsh realities of humanitarian crisis and armed conflict. I hope to combine my experiences working in U.S. embassies and at austere army outposts with my passion for narrative writing. After Oxford, I plan to return to the Middle East to tell stories in an on-the-ground and intimate manner, just as they should be told. I'm proud to be an Overseas Press Club scholar, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to continue telling these stories of the utmost importance. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Jay Doherty, and my lifelong interest in journalism has taken shape at Fordham University, where I currently serve as the politics reporter for our national public radio affiliate, WFUV. Interviewing and covering breaking news for radio and interning at CNN has cemented my goal of being a journalist. As a resident of Los Angeles, I spent part of my holiday break helping my family while documenting the fires which recently came close to destroying our home. At the time I'm recording this right now, we've been evacuated from our house for about 2 weeks, and we consider ourselves very lucky. Before the fire's fallout, I had been concentrating on school and my thrilling assignments at CNN for Anderson Cooper 360, where I've had the privilege to help cover dozens of historic events. I was lucky enough to be an intern on the team that produced live coverage of the attempted assassination of Donald Trump, on-the-ground reporting of Hurricane Helene, live conflict in the Middle East, and CNN's global broadcast of the 2024 U.S. presidential election results. My goal is to become a reporter who covers regions experiencing conflict, human rights struggles, and societal transformations. At Fordham, I got to co-direct a documentary on change in the American Catholic priesthood, which inspired my upcoming project in Zambia this summer. There I plan to report on how religious trends in the West differ from and are influenced by the Global South. I really hope my work can humanize global issues, encourage international cooperation, and drive positive action in communities that are too often overlooked. Thank you so much to the Overseas Press Club Foundation for this amazing opportunity.
When I was in South Africa in late 2021 as a journalism trainee for Estadão, one of Brazil's largest newspapers, I had the intense opportunity to cover the emergence of a new COVID-19 variant, later named Omicron. The pressure to be fast was enormous, but I knew accuracy was critical. I remember the tension as social media buzzed with speculation, calling the variant new. Yet, I resisted the urge to rush, focusing instead on verifying facts. I reached out to a leading scientist involved in sequencing the variant, who confirmed that the World Health Organization was classifying it as a variant of concern, and that an official name was imminent. I prepared the story carefully, leaving room to update the name once announced. When the WHO confirmed Omicron, I was part of the team that published one of the first global reports, beating even major international outlets. The next day, my report was front-page news in Brazil. That experience taught me a valuable lesson. To me, journalism is not just about speed. It's about being credible and trustworthy. Sharing accurate information impacts public health, policy, and communities, and it's a responsibility I'm proud to uphold. Moments like this remind me why I'm so passionate about this profession. Thank you, OPC, for betting the future of international journalism.
My name is Inaara Gangji, and I'm a journalist from Tanzania with experience reporting around the world and with a focus on less developed parts. My work incorporates my keen interest in data journalism and policy and its power to illuminate reporting. As an undergraduate in journalism at Northwestern University, and now as a student at the UC-Berkeley Graduate School of Journalism, I've been sharpening my skills as a data-driven reporter. As a Tanzanian, I decided to become a journalist to examine the many pressing issues that affect my home country and many others. While at Northwestern, I worked on data stories for Al Jazeera, reported in communities in Ghana, and covered social justice issues at USA Today during the 2020 primaries. As a contributor of business stories at Forbes Africa, I found that business and demographic data about people from Africa like me and women in general either did not exist or was disregarded. This insight about unexplored avenues of reporting made me realize that data stories and multimedia are important to me. These data allow one to see patterns and tell stories that otherwise may be hidden. The proliferation of AI and technology and its role in media is what led me back to graduate school in the first place. The Mental Health Journalism Fellowship I received during the pandemic from the Carter Center, and my work in documentary production on the social impact of sport during the FIFA World Cup 2022 enabled me to tell stories about Africa and the Middle East that demonstrated how every issue is an inequality issue. This is why I teach media and democracy to undergraduate students at UC-Berkeley. My journalism career has a long way to go, and I believe the support from the OPC Foundation will enrich my skills and help me build a career in foreign correspondence that can impact policy. That interpretive work may also help point to solutions that could make many lives better. Thank you.
This is Eliani, Jose, and their 3 children in Times Square. This Venezuelan family arrived in New York City in the summer of 2023 and lived in the city's shelter system for asylum seekers. They are among the more than 200,000 migrants who have come to New York since the spring of 2022. Migrants' arrival in the city has become a news story locally, nationally, and even around the world. I met Eliani and Jose during my reporting, as migrants in New York has been my beat for the past year. I feel uniquely positioned to cover these stories because of my language skills. I speak Spanish and French, and a large majority of migrants in New York are either from Latin America or from French-speaking West Africa. I have interviewed countless migrants and quickly gained their trust because we speak the same language. My reporting culminated in an episode I co-hosted on NPR's economics podcast, The Indicator. The episode was an explainer on the process of how asylum seekers get work permits. As President Trump promises mass deportations of immigrants, I think it is more important than ever to report on migrants' stories. I thank OPC for the opportunity they have given me to continue my reporting on immigration.
I dedicated myself to journalism on April 21st, 2018, the night my neighbor, veteran local reporter Angel Gaona was shot and killed in Bluefields, Nicaragua while reporting on anti-government protests. I had long respected Angel's investigative journalism, which documented corruption and held people who abused power accountable. By choosing to pick up Angel's profession that night, the total number of journalists in Nicaragua remained the same, despite attacks on reporters and repression of the press. I began a career devoted to deep, unbiased reporting from the ground, and in my first stories covered what became a nationwide civil conflict in Nicaragua for The Guardian and Washington Post. I learned that I'm the kind of reporter that can run toward the gunfire, into the fray, the kind of journalist that can turn a tense standoff with paramilitary and a gun to my head into an interview genuinely seeking to understand the motives that drive conflict and individual people. I've reported from every country in the Americas, always searching for new sources, new stories, and new perspectives. Now, as a fellow at the Stabile Center for Investigative Journalism, I'm developing hard-hitting investigations that dig deep to uncover wrongdoing. I'm still trying to continue Angel's legacy, going to any lengths necessary to bring readers pressing stories from the ground that might otherwise go untold, and to hold accountable those who abuse power.
Hi, my name is Evan Gorelick. I'm a senior at Yale University, a tech journalist, and an aspiring foreign correspondent. On a hot morning this past summer, I was headed downtown in the New York subway. My assignment was to report on a labor union protest outside Uber's corporate headquarters. For years now, drivers have been sparring with rideshare companies over low pay and scanty labor protections. But at least from the outside, this protest seemed pretty different to me. Hundreds of drivers waved signs in Spanish and English about Uber's abusos and greed, along with something drivers were calling lockouts. Although I didn't know it at the time, Uber had recently started locking drivers out of its app to exploit a loophole in the city's minimum wage algorithm. So I broke the story. Drivers were seeing their wages fall as much as 50%. Many drivers, the vast majority of whom are immigrants in New York City and rely on driving as their primary source of income, were struggling to pay off car loans and support their families. As a tech journalist, I write about how digitalization shapes and exacerbates social challenges. How the gig economy, for instance, can create livelihoods and it can destroy them. Ultimately, I aim to understand, are these technologies benefiting humanity or are they exploiting those who are most vulnerable? Or maybe a little bit of both. I've had the privilege of interviewing hundreds of tech stakeholders now, from Uber drivers to founders to policymakers to hackers. And it's become clear to me that emerging tech may be the defining news story of my lifetime. But as it becomes increasingly transnational, we'll need journalists who can navigate that global complexity. I aim to be one of those journalists, and I'm very grateful to the OPC Foundation for helping me get there. Thank you.
My name is Isaac Holmberg, and I'm a master's student in Russian and East European Studies at the University of Oxford. I was born in Honolulu, Hawaii, but when I was in elementary school, my mother and I moved to rural Bavaria. Growing up in a bilingual household, I eventually became fluent in German. After high school, I took a gap year so two friends and I could set out in a van from Germany to Armenia, crossing Ukraine and the expanse of Russia's Caspian Steppe and North Caucasus. Armed with my camera and drone, I gained a glimpse into the astounding cultural and religious diversity of the country. But I was also introduced to uncomfortable questions about Russia's treatment of minorities and the country's colonial past and present. On this trip, I discovered my passion for journalism and became inspired to learn more about the post-Soviet region. I started learning Russian, studied abroad in St. Petersburg just before Russia launched its invasion of Ukraine, and later worked in the Russia department of Germany's leading foreign policy think tank. Most recently, fieldwork for my master's thesis brought me to Kazakhstan. There, on the country's northern border with Russia, I visited the city of Petropavl, where ethnic Russians are a majority. Investigating a new university partnership between Petropavl's local university and the University of Arizona, I learned that many local residents were suspicious about cooperating with an American school. The city's divided loyalties and Russia's lasting appeal became the story that I told in my OPC essay. With the OPC Foundation's help, I hope to continue my work on the post-Soviet region and eventually return to Central Asia. Thank you very much.
Hi, my name is Hannah Johansson, and I am in the last semester of my master's degree at UC-Berkeley. I've decided to write my thesis about water conflicts in California's agricultural region, where I was born and where my grandparents are farmers. This region, like all of California, is suffering from water scarcity brought on by climate change. While reporting, I met farmers, other journalists, lawyers, policymakers, homeowners, and workers all on the front lines of California's water problems. But before journalism school, I was on the path to becoming an ecologist, and I approached environmental problems from a scientific angle. But my reporting at J School has taught me that every big environmental problem is also an extremely complicated economic and political problem. As a reporter, this motivates me to find stories all over the world. For example, last summer, while I was studying Spanish in Guatemala, I interviewed a local politician who was leading a fight against a new mall that diverted water from residents' houses. Back in California, I talked with a farmer who is going out of business because of a new water regulation. And now I'm looking into a report on a new oil project in northern Alaska that could drastically raise the price of food in remote communities. My fascination and passion for environmental reporting will drive me to the next phase of my career. Thank you so much to the Overseas Press Club for helping me get there.
Hi, my name is Chris Guo. I grew up in China, where learning about foreign affairs was as simple as a stroll through the local market or a lively conversation with a taxi driver. I've always been curious about the world around me, from my neighborhood in China to my passport country, the United States, thousands of miles away. During taxi rides, I would banter with drivers about their views on Obama and Xi Jinping, and I'd hear older women griping about the rising cost of living while shopping at the open-air market. Every summer, I visited the US with my family, where I told stories of life in China to my friends and cousins, attempting to translate my world abroad into terms they would understand. I didn't know it at the time, but I was already, in some small way, acting as a foreign correspondent, engaging in the fundamental journalistic endeavor of mediating between the world of one's readers and the world one sees through reporting. After college, my interest in foreign affairs journalism eventually led me back abroad to the small city of Limerick, Ireland, to earn my master's in journalism and to report from overseas. In Limerick, I focused my print and audio reporting on the changing role of the Catholic Church in Ireland, including the declining number of people joining the priesthood in Limerick Diocese and the church's relationship with local communities. As I continue my career, I hope to keep telling stories about people in Asia, Europe, and elsewhere, and I'm incredibly grateful for the OPC Foundation's support for my work.
The ground was shaking with the aftershocks of artillery fire when my editor turned to me. "If you hear a rocket siren," she said, "you'll have 7 seconds to find cover." We were standing in the wreckage of a kibbutz called Nir Oz, just an open field away from the Gaza Strip. On either side of the border fence, there was nothing but devastation, a horizon of blackened ruins, torn lives, and shattered hope. One survivor who had just recently returned to the kibbutz said that his life was now divided into 2 parts, before and after October 7th. Not far off, I could see the Gaza Strip, the smoke rising from relentless Israeli bombardment. In the middle of that destruction, a refugee told me he had been displaced 7 times in 10 months. Living in an insect-infested tent, his entire life whittled down to the knapsack he carried when he was forced from his since-demolished home. As I listened to more stories reporting last summer for HARPER'S, I felt the weight of the human suffering around me on both sides of the conflict. My name is Gabe Levin. At the Cornell Daily Sun, where I serve as editor-in-chief, I faced the challenge of covering this same conflict, albeit from a different angle, the emotional storm that threatened to rip apart our campus. It hit especially close to home when an upperclassman threatened to bring an assault rifle to school and hunt down any and every Jew, me included. Like in my reporting abroad, my role was to ensure our coverage was fair, accurate, and sensitive. I hope to return to the Middle East to build on my commitment to fostering understanding across differences through rigorous reporting. Thank you.
September 8th, 2022 was a big day in my journey as a student journalist. I had two bylines on the front page of the Daily Pennsylvanian, where I covered the University of Pennsylvania's administration. One was a profile of our new president, Liz McGill, and the other an investigation into our Middle East Center's jeopardized future after it lost federal funding. Little did I know that these two stories would intersect a year later to spark national controversy. A Palestinian literature festival, sponsored by the Middle East Center, drew backlash from critics who viewed it as anti-Semitic, while supporters staunchly defended it. 2 weeks later, Hamas attacked Israel, sparking war in Gaza that deeply affected campus. Donors, alumni, politicians, and others pressed McGill to address what they called a pervasive anti-Jewish culture at Penn. McGill, only a year into her job, was suddenly fighting to keep it, and I was fighting too. I had to balance her trust while investigating boardroom drama led by influential Wall Street figures pushing for her ouster, and I had to build rapport among the Middle Eastern campus community, which faced online vitriol and concerns over a Palestine exception to free speech. By semester's end, McGill had resigned, and Washington was demanding Penn turn over student and faculty records. As an overseas press club scholar, I hope to explore how the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has reshaped the college generation globally. Whether I travel to Europe, Latin America, or elsewhere, I'd like to understand the true power players in campus communities abroad and how they're influencing the viewpoints of the next generation to pursue peace in the Middle East.
In my previous career, outside of journalism, I felt that the world outside was passing me by. Back in college, where I was a history major, I studied the Civil Rights Movement, the Cold War, and the fall of empires. While I read, I often marveled at how amazing it would have been to live during these times of momentous change. Revisiting my history books after some time in the corporate world, I thought, we're living in crazy times right now. This is a moment of great change. That's when I decided that I needed to spend my life trying to make sense of the world around me, and that journalism would be the best way to do it. Almost 2 years since that moment, I've reported in Spanish, English, French, and Italian, and I've connected with people whose lives have been vastly different than mine. While reporting in Baltimore, I dove into a housing law that was meant to protect tenants, but instead had loopholes that enabled landlords to keep their properties in unlivable conditions. One family I interviewed had 3 children who had found cockroaches in their ears due to an ongoing pest infection. The story was published in English in the Baltimore Banner, with a Spanish version on the way. In New York, in a waiting room, I started chatting with a Puerto Rican woman who had been on the wait list for affordable housing for almost 15 years. About 7 years into her wait, she had finally been approved, but it was taken away because of her daughter's death. I wrote her story in Spanish and translated it to English. Both versions are published in the New York City News Service. I'd like to thank the Overseas Press Club Foundation for the opportunity to continue my reporting and for the mentoring that I'm sure will be a fundamental step in my career. Thank you.
I arrived in Kashmir 2 weeks after a local journalist had been brutally assaulted by police. A military officer was stationed at every 5 feet, and there were snipers on rooftops with guns drawn. Our car was stopped and searched. I, in the back seat, kept my camera rolling, just hoping it would not be discovered. My name is Kulsum Rizvi. I'm a senior at Duke and an aspiring visual journalist and documentary filmmaker. I grew up in a small city in northern India where visual storytelling became my way to speak truth to power. In India, I reported on Muslims publicly practicing their faith under a right-wing nationalist government. In Kashmir, I visited the former press club and spoke to journalists about press repression. My most ambitious project to date is a documentary 2 years in the making, exploring how communities in Iceland, Oregon, and Mexico have been conducting funerals for dying and dead glaciers. For many of them, these glaciers hold a sacred value. I interviewed remote communities, from Icelandic farmers to indigenous weather healers in rural Mexico. Yes, even Mexico has glaciers. My storytelling has taken me to places I never expected to visit and given me a chance to speak to people I otherwise never would have encountered. What connects my work is a desire to practice community-centered journalism that doesn't just take away stories, but actually imparts value to communities, and to document the human experience in a way that doesn't let past injustices be forgotten and repeated. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Claudia Rosell, and I am a Spanish filmmaker, photographer, and producer. My parents were avid travelers and historians who introduced me early on to cultures far different from my own. I began capturing these experiences with my camera, first for my friends back home, then as a way to make sense of the world. I soon understood how stories could have the power to bring change, and the more I traveled, the more I realized how hunger, lack of healthcare, poverty, and violence continue to be prevalent in many parts of the world. So in 2018, I packed my bags and I traveled to Greece to document the arrival of thousands of asylum seekers to European shores. There, I met people from all different parts of the world who helped me realize how our stories are connected across borders. And since then, I have the privilege of working in places like Thailand, Mexico, Palestine, Kenya, and Somalia, where I spent the last 4 years documenting the country's multiple crises. I've witnessed the devastating effects of climate change on communities who've lost everything to droughts and floods. I've also seen the human cost of border policies while interviewing people trafficked and exploited in dangerous jobs just to survive. I want my journalism to help amplify the voices of those living at the forefront of global crisis, and I would like to thank the OPC Foundation for their support to continue my journey.
I just turned 20 when I faced my first libel complaint in Manila in the Philippines. It came from a government official. I revealed that they had stopped playing any roles in the national government even when they continued to receive a high-paying salary, in full and at the expense of millions of Filipino taxpayers. I remember the cold white stacks of paper that bore the criminal complaint, each page saying that I shouldn't have filed my story. The complaint eventually got dismissed for being bogus and baseless. Amid the celebration, my colleagues called me brave, but deep in my chest, I felt a grip. Fear. I was petrified, realizing that doing what I loved meant facing more of these cold white stacks of paper. But then, my editors at Rappler, my former newsroom, told me this: it's a badge of honor. Keep doing what you're doing. I have steeled myself since then, reporting on the Philippine drug war, where I revealed the wrongdoing of police operatives. I continued carrying their words as I reported on typhoons, earthquakes, hostage takings, national elections, and conflict in the South China Sea. In all of them, I aimed to tell the stories that people in power would have rather kept untold. I continued to do so after I migrated here in the United States, now aiming to tell the story of climate change. In the near future, I hope to report again in my home region in Asia, this time without fear of government retaliation. This to me is what journalism is, to hold power into account even in the face of threats. No amount of cold white stacks of paper will ever be enough to stop me from doing this. I thank the Overseas Press Club Foundation for supporting me and my journalism.
Hello. My name is Luke Tyson. I'm from Chicago, and I am a senior at Yale, where I double major in English and humanities. And my journey into journalism really began when I was 19, and I was taking a gap year before starting college, and I was living in Rabat, Morocco, where I was writing for an English language newspaper. And while I was there, I got to write a number of different stories, but the one that really made an impact on me was a story that I worked on about a group of migrants and the harrowing conditions that they were facing as they attempt to travel from sub-Saharan Africa up through Morocco and across the Gibraltar Strait into Europe. And I found the experience of writing that piece extremely eye-opening, and it really solidified my commitment as a writer to seeking to understand and explain global systems of law and migration and how they're impacting the lives of people around the globe. And that's a commitment I've really tried to carry with me throughout my time here at Yale. Over the past 4 years, I've traveled around the world debating global law and policy for the university's mock trial and Model United Nations teams. I spent a summer teaching international relations courses to middle schoolers in China, and I spent several months writing for The Record, a nonprofit newsroom outside Chicago, where I covered local politics and the fight for gun safety reforms in the aftermath of a mass shooting. Throughout all these experiences, one of my most valuable tools has been language. In addition to English, I speak French, Spanish, Arabic, and Hindi. And I really see these languages as more than just tools for communication, but ways of building a deep trust between subject and storyteller, seeking to understand someone on their own terms, in their own words. In that vein, I am extremely excited to be an Overseas Press Club Foundation Scholar this year, and I hope to return to the Middle East to cover issues of law, migration, and human rights, writing stories that bring a bit of humanity to the global policies that govern our world. Thank you very much to the Foundation.
They're an impressive group. Now, Kat, do you want to come up and give out the citations? The bar is still open and there's still food. So if you haven't had a chance to have something, please do now. And thank you all for coming, and especially thank you to our winners for sharing your stories with us.